Welcome back to the Wyatt Claypool Show, everyone. I don't want to alarm you, but I'm starting to get the feeling that this Prime Minister Justin Trudeau guy and his Liberal government are not spending our taxpayer dollars effectively. I know, wild thought, because Liberal Party politicians keep coming out and stating that they're financial surgeons and that we're the best in the G7 on some vague metrics or whatever. But we have to face facts at some point, and these guys might be wasting our money. Obviously, I'm kidding here, but it's absolutely wild to me that 8.5 years on to the Liberal government existing, that they're still causing themselves scandals with massive misallocations of money, or just basically giving money as bribes to corporate friends of theirs. Like, at some point, I know that this is kind of their bread and butter of winning support by giving big contracts to friends and then having them drum up votes for them. This is also why they spend so much in the public sector. The more people they employ, the more people that feel that they should be voting Liberal or at least NDP in order to keep their jobs. But at some point, I thought they would kind of go under the surface a little bit more on how they spend this money. But every day, a conservative MP can stand up and say, you guys somehow spent $1 trillion on like postage stamps for your friend's company. Can you explain this? And they're like, they just become all shoulders about it. They're like, we don't know why we spent that. And apparently nobody has the answer to anything inside the Liberal government. You can ask anybody from an MP, a minister, deputy minister, staffer, janitor, and no one knows what they're doing. And somebody else is always the one to ask you a question. Like, if you actually followed the trail of people that the Liberals direct you to ask questions to, eventually you would come full circle and be asking the same person, then you'd be going back down the rabbit hole again, because really they don't have answers. And each person is just saving themselves by saying, well, it was actually somebody else who would have been in charge of this, even though they are literally the person in charge of the department with the corruption issue. But that leads me to this great clip of Conservative MP, I believe his name is Dan Manzer, going after the Liberals for spending $700 million subsidizing a subsidiary of Volkswagen, oddly enough, not named after anything that would indicate they're from Volkswagen. And they're being paid $700 million as part of the green, like, net zero accelerator fund or whatever, really is just the green slush fund. And that they can't even account for if this is actually tied to reducing emissions. Like, I don't really care all that much about reducing emissions because I care more about human prosperity before I care about emissions and vague issues around the climate. But if you're going to spend the money, and that is the stated purpose of the fund, and then when we ask you, hey, can you account for any emissions reductions that this money has led to? And the person's like, I don't know. That's kind of a problem. But here's a great clip of Dan going.
The government gave away $700 million to a company by the name of PowerCo through the Net Zero Accelerator Fund. PowerCo is owned by Volkswagen Group, a German company that made over $476 billion, that's with a B, $476 billion in revenue last year. How many emissions are supposed to be reduced directly from the $700 million handout?
I don't have the information, and that's a question to ask the people who manage the programs, as I told you before.
You are the Deputy Minister of Environment.
I am the Deputy Ministers of...
To be clear on what a deputy minister is, and this makes it even more pathetic that this guy can't answer, the deputy minister is kind of like the permanent minister inside the ministry. So this is the Ministry of Environment, and this is the Deputy Minister of Environment. They're an unelected official who serves at the behest of the minister. They're the person who generally knows how everything works. They don't set policy, but they carry policy out. When you want certain changes made, they're the person who knows who to contact, how to get it done. And this guy, with all the experience he has, maybe he's new. Even if he's 2 days old into the job, and you don't know what the accelerator fund actually requires in order to get $700 million, that's a problem. There's $8 billion in this slush fund that is going out to companies tied to foreign organizations like Volkswagen and other organizations, and they don't know what they're even supposed to do if they get the money. It really just seems like this allows the Liberals to artificially create fake jobs in different parts of the country where they need voters. And then they can employ people there who then feel beholden to the Liberals in order to keep their jobs, because if the Liberals get thrown out, there is a potential that the Conservatives or some other government might cut off the subsidies. And so this is the more of this deputy minister flailing around.
Of environment, but I'm not responsible for all programs that are managed under the federal government.
So who is responsible?
The deputy minister of ISED is the one who should answer your questions about the agreements they have with this business and why they. It's not convenient. It's actually
Order. Order. Mr. Major, you have 4 minutes.
So I'll ask another one, and I'm sure you got the same excuse. The government gave away $61 million to a company by the name of Pratt & Whitney through their Net Zero Accelerator Fund. Pratt & Whitney is owned by RTX, an American company worth over $190 billion. How many emissions are supposed to be reduced directly from the $61 million handout?
it's the same answer.
You have no idea. And what's most frustrating, you're so flippant about it. You don't even care.
And you think that too, and Dan Manzer is completely right, that if this guy, and it's so convenient that it's another deputy minister who they should be asking this to, why wouldn't he have pointed this out before this committee testimony had started, that, oh, if you're going to ask me questions about these programs, because these guys tend to know what the questions are ahead of time, because you usually have to submit generally the line of question that you want to go down, and he just says, you should have asked this other guy over here. No, you should inform us who we should be asking, and really, you're the one who should be able to answer. You're literally the deputy minister of the environment ministry, and you don't know this massive slush fund that your ministry is tied to, what the money goes to, even if he gave a vague answer like, well, with a lot of these companies, if they reduce emissions by 10% over the next 5 years, we're happy with that. As long as they have emissions lower somewhat and they don't grow even as the company grows, we're okay with that. That would be maybe, I still think it's a stupid waste of taxpayer money, but that would maybe be somewhat satisfactory as an answer. They don't even have that. They just have, oh yes, you need to go and talk to this man up on this hill somewhere in Tibet, and then he might tell you the person that you need to know. It's always that there's somebody a million miles away that you're never going to be able to actually get in contact with who knows the answer. It's always somebody, like 5 feet away from the next person who knows the next person, whatever. It's very frustrating, and it's being done this way for a reason. And this is just how they do things these days. But I want to get to some other news stories. I'm going to skip over some I had planned here for now, because I want to jump into this video from Ryan Turnbull, one of the more clownish Liberal MPs. I think he's in a running gun battle with Mark Garrettson and who else would I throw in there? What is it, Jennifer O'Connell? Yeah, I'd throw her in there with them. They're Yara Sachs as well. They're all 4 of them in a running gun battle to see who is the most embarrassing Liberal MP. But here's Ryan Turnbull trying to gaslight you, tell you that everything's absolutely fine while standing outside the Bank of Canada and saying that we're actually the best in the G7. This is what I had hinted at earlier in the video, and this is what drives me up the wall. But I'll let him talk for a little bit before I jump back in here.
Today I'm here at the Bank of Canada. I wanted to share some great news with my constituents in Whitby and all Canadians. The Bank of Canada has dropped the central interest rate for the first time in 4 years, alleviating some of the pressure on families and businesses. This recent and monumental rate cut was made possible by the downward trend in inflation over the last year, and especially the last 4 months, where we've seen inflation numbers within the Bank of Canada's target between 1% and 3%.
Okay, I have to stop him here. This is so stupid. No, inflation is not down. The rate of inflation is down. So when it's between that target of 1% to 3%, that means all the inflation that's happened over the past 4 years, from terrible COVID policies from the Liberals, from terrible monetary policies, from the extremely low interest rates that the Liberals were coasting on before 2020, that now our inflation is only 1% to 3%, but that inflation is on top of all the price increases that already occurred. No, inflation is not down. Inflation's impact is just slowing, but in terms of the overall impact on prices, it's as bad as ever because that 3%, that 1 to 3% that is occurring now is on top of the 7 to 9% that we had during some of the past years. So no, he's entirely wrong. He's just lying to you and hoping that you don't actually know how public finance works. And let's be real, the Bank of Canada lowered interest rates because Justin Trudeau needs to get reelected. This happens all over the world. Whenever somebody's in some economic trouble, they always have the central bank lower interest rates, get the economy pumping back up. It artificially gives a short-term boost to the economy. Everyone feels like we have this momentum, and then the Liberals can potentially get some more support back. I'm not sure if it's going to work. The Liberals are improving a little bit in the polls, but overall, if we get hit by another wave of inflation before the next election, people are going to realize that this is entirely artificial. This is just the Liberals trying to manipulate what is supposed to be the neutral central bank in order to win votes. And he's going to get into this a little bit more of trying to pretend that it's just because of the financial and economic wizardry of the Liberal government that we're technically the best in the world if you really think about it, not at all, and you just accept what we say.
Canada is the first G7 country whose central bank has chosen to take this positive step, which comes at a time when Canadians have endured many months of inflated costs.
How does making money easier to obtain lower inflation? I'd love for Ryan Turnbull to tell me this. There are so many people in government whose minds are just pickled. They don't know what they're saying. They simply have a script and read it. These people are just incompetent. This is frankly why it would be very difficult for me to ever work as an advisor to anybody in government. And I'm not trying to be like arrogant here. Would apply to most of you guys. Advising politicians is horrible because you're more often than not advising somebody stupider than you. Not literally. They might have a high IQ, but they pretend to be stupid in order to toe the line of what feels politically correct to say at the time. So Ryan Turnbull is voluntarily making himself dumber to pretend that inflation will go down when we start pumping money into the economy.
This is certainly a reassuring sign for Canadians. There is no doubt. According to the Bank of Canada governor, our government sticking to the fiscal guardrails in the federal budget was helpful in battling inflation. Our government's economic plan is working and is creating the conditions for rates to come down, and this rate cut marks welcome relief for Canadians, especially for those with variable rate mortgages who will be impacted by every decline, no matter how small.
Except they're being taxed more, whether directly or indirectly. They're being taxed more. That's actually how the Liberals got control of some of the public financing. It wasn't because they started sticking to the fiscal guardrails. They didn't. They expanded the fiscal guardrails. They've increased taxes. The capital gains tax is a big, basically, theft of invested money in Canada so that the Liberals can pretend that they're lowering our debt to GDP ratio. They're only lowering it because they're taking more money than ever from people. That's not actually lowering debt to GDP in a way that most people care about. That's like saying, technically, the Soviet Union had a balanced budget and no debt. I think they actually did have debt, but you get my point. In theory, a communist government has no debt and they have no deficits because they have all the money in the economy and then they hand out some to people as they need it. Because they have all the money, obviously they're never at a loss for spending because they have 100% of the dollars. That's basically what the Liberals are bragging about, is that they've fixed our upward trajectory in terms of debt because they've taken all your money in order to pretend that they're more fiscally solvent than they really are. If they're not. And if anything, they're going to be chasing people over the border into the United States or into, the Cayman Islands or somewhere else who don't want to get absolutely destroyed when they end up selling their business, when they sell their second home, when they have to sell a bunch of investments. Because although you hear, well, you're only being taxed, or your inclusion rate only increases to 66% when you make more than $250,000 in investments in a year. Most people will eventually experience that. If you're saving your money well, you have another property, you have a small business and you sell that property, that would be considered investment money. So you would have to pay way more money on that that you would have just been able to keep as normal. It's ridiculous. You should have exemptions for selling off investments because you were taxed on the money that you invested. And then as that money grew, it would be stupid to tax it 1-to-1 like it was normal income. That's why we only taxed it half. If anything, it should be even lower because that money is going around and creating jobs. You guys all know this, but I'm frustrated because I'm trying to explain this to liberal people out there. But speaking of liberal people, I just quickly want to talk about this incredibly silly post from a man out in Toronto. He says, this Shay Greenfield, I assume someone is looking into how the Conservative Party compiled its list of Jewish homes in Toronto to target with this letter, because it seems that only Jewish households receive this letter. There is so much complaining over this letter that the Conservative Party put out about anti-Semitism to Jewish households, which they're acting like they had some sort of special list to send people stuff. It's not that hard to figure out people with Jewish last names and specifically target them with an advertisement. But they were sending people in Toronto who are Jewish this letter, basically saying that they take anti-Semitism seriously and we need to crack down on all those nutcases standing up for terrorist groups in our streets, blocking literally traffic around Jewish neighborhoods to inconvenience people as much as possible, screaming crazy genocidal stuff. That this guy, he's so progressive. He might be Jewish, but he's so progressive. He's more offended by the Conservatives sending him a letter saying that we take anti-Semitism seriously than he is offended by the NDP and the Liberals just enabling anti-Semites, enabling Hamas. We have Yara Sachs, the horrible Liberal MP for York Centre, which I hope she gets smashed in that election next fall in the federal election. She went out and hung out with Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank, the president of the Palestinian Authority, also known as Fatah, who literally has pay-for-slay programs where they give money to people in the West Bank if they go kill Jews. They give their family stipends if they die doing it. That they met with those people. But this Greenfield guy is more upset by this letter saying that, hey, we actually don't think that you should die as a human being. But, you know, that's offensive to progressives. And this demonstrates the problem in so many communities. The progressives brainwash people into being against their own interests, even though he should be in favor of his own community's safety, his own personal safety. There's synagogues all over Canada being firebombed and shot at, multiple girls' schools, Jewish girls' schools being shot at, that he is still more elevated by the idea that he was sent a letter. That is utterly insane to me. And it's just progressive whining that I find so abysmally annoying. All these people who actively get mad over the silliest things possible, at the same time that their own side or people that they consider to be in common cause with are the actual villains out there. Here's an absolutely wacky clip of people on crazy pills trying to get elevated about some kids riding scooters around a pride crosswalk.
Just saw this group of teenagers like deliberately making marks and scratch marks with their Lime scooters, like just all around.
Several witnesses confronted the group and called police.
We're not going to sit by as we watch people deliberately commit a hate crime, like right in the middle of downtown.
After looking at security footage, officers arrested 3 teenagers. 2 are minors and 1 is 19-year-old Ruslan Turco.
You are charged with 1 count malicious mischief.
Turco had his first appearance in court this afternoon. The judge released him under the condition he doesn't go near the crosswalk or the other teenagers. Prosecutors, though, had asked the judge to set a $15,000 bond since that's how much it costs to repaint the mural.
The community really...
Okay, also, it didn't cost $15,000 to repaint the mural. It costs certain, like, contracted city workers being overpaid $15,000 to repaint the crosswalk. Let's not pretend that this is the actual cost of doing this. But, like, the idea that this was a field day on Twitter, that this happened, I can't believe it. They committed a hate crime. And is it a hate crime? No. Is it dumb to do? Should they be probably fined for it? Should they get some sort of like authorities coming down on them and like making it clear that if you do this again, we charge you? Sure. Because even though I think the pride crosswalks are stupid and they shouldn't be, no public money should be wasted on stuff like this, it's not required. It's obviously political. They even have it, it's not just the pride flag, it's the pride progress flag, which implies a lot of left-wing values and left-wing, more socialist type politics that's involved in that. No, don't take my word for it. You can read the people who actually theorize this kind of queer theory type stuff, and they very much believe that they are pushing the values of socialism through what they do. Regardless, anyways, I want to just quickly go down memory lane and just highlight things that have gone on in Canada that doesn't get the left that upset. Remember when this fellow was actually trying to burn down a church in Canada? This man was later arrested, but I noticed that there wasn't that much sort of vitriol and horror reactions from the progressives out there. Not when a church was burned down in Toronto a couple days ago, a historic church was burned down. Not this Baptist church that was built in the late 1880s or so, that was the oldest Baptist church in all of Canada. If, like, I don't think it was North America, but like the oldest Baptist church, I believe, in Canada was burnt down, and we get no news stories on it. Yet we have news coverage of a 19-year-old kid and some other people who were minors fooling around, being dumb about a crosswalk. But literally, historic churches, older than anyone in Canada, gets burnt down, and people can't even get people don't get emotional about it. They don't care that much. Who cares? That's not a big deal. Well, why are you freaking out? Crying over spilled milk? And all these people talking about hate crimes and bigotry. At the same time, these are the sorts of people who actually support, they're the type of people who support this type of stuff. The Just Stop Oil morons out in the UK trying to disrupt the wedding of the Baron, or I think the Duke of Westminster. They tried to basically spray smoke and whatnot at his wedding to ruin the entire event. And although this is not having to do as much with exactly Canadian progressivism, this happens all the time and does not get a lot of notice from the left. They don't care because it's something they agree with. You know, they don't care that in the United States you have these pro-Hamas morons going around literally doing what looks like a January 6th style protest along the White House in favor of Hamas.
That Zionism has lost. Israel has lost. But already has remember that Britain was the butcher of Gaza, and history will show that Gaza will not.
No hate crimes here. The funny thing is, I always hear people whining about hate crimes who are those who actually do push hateful, divisive rhetoric. You know, people who actively go around trying to ruin art collections at these different studios, and the left doesn't care about it because they don't care about history, they don't care about values, they only care about winning. And so that's why when stuff like a temporary pride crosswalk gets black tire marks spread on it, this becomes a focusing event for the left that they have to get mad about. And I want to bring up something else here, because this happened to my friend Brian Burgay out in British Columbia. But he simply said, in response to fire trucks being painted up with these Pride Progress flags, that, hey, why are we doing this? This doesn't seem like a good use of taxpayer money. This is obviously political. And the amount of NDP candidates and NDP activists on Twitter going after him for these tweets was absolutely insane. I want to see if I can find it. Yeah, I think I found it. It was this NDP MP who was freaking out about it, who I want to highlight right here. Spencer Chandler Hubert, or whatever his name is. Yes, okay, so we have this guy, Spencer Chandra Hebert, says in this post, another BC Conservative candidate showing they stand with those who want LGBT people to be pushed back in the closet. John Rusted, why are you supporting this? And Brian Burgay, who, mind you, is a social moderate when it comes to issues like this. He is not a social conservative. He is not a social progressive. He said, I prefer when the police and firefighters don't get political. But that's just me, I guess. And yes, this is political, don't even try. And he was responding to this photo of Spencer Chandra Hebert, celebrating the fact that the firefighters were painting up their fire trucks for Pride, something that is a massive waste of money and should not be something that we expect that we spend money on. This is obviously political. Yes, people can say, well, it's just about tolerance. No, it's not, because people are already perfectly tolerant. This is about this movement, this ideology, which is hyper-progressivism. It's that everything that our nation must be defined by hyper-progressivism. That's why they want it everywhere, to make sure that it never is out of the question or never out of the conversation. That these people are now offended because he said a very sensible thing that, yeah, this is political and I don't want this money being spent on this. And you get so many of these people. I'm trying to go through. Here's an MLA, another MLA, because Spencer is an NDP MLA out here in British Columbia. This other MLA, Kelly Padden, says, this is the third one of John Rusted's candidates to criticize the 2SLGBTQIA plus community in Pride, and the third time he has refused to denounce it. We all understand that some of these police and firefighters are members of the 2SLGBTQIA community. Oh my goodness, they always have to say the full acronym. And it deserves a celebration, right? No, it doesn't actually deserve celebration. Know why? Because if you're in a real tolerant country, you don't need to bring it up all the time. If you do need to bring it up all the time, well, they'll pretend like, well, we need to do it all the time because there isn't enough tolerance yet. We're perfectly tolerant. You're doing it because there's obviously something else ideological that you're trying to push. And obviously that is stuff like gender theory in the classrooms. It's things going after the family. As hyperbolic as that sounds, these people legitimately don't really think that family is a value. They think that you're just some old fogey if you think that, traditional family values might matter. That's really what they want, is that they want progressivism to replace traditional Canadian values. And so, yes, these people are political, and I hope if you're in British Columbia, you are voting for the BC Conservatives. Do not vote for BC United. Oh, goodness. Also, make sure you donate to the BC Conservatives if you are in BC, because if you don't donate, nobody else is going to. You always have to have that attitude that if you don't do it yourself, nobody else is going to do it. But now I want to end off today talking about this extremely stupid clip from NDP MP Nikki Ashton talking about why we need to protect children by censoring speech online.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We know that kids in this country are struggling and we need to do more. Families are crying out for solutions to keep their kids safe. As legislators, we need to be solution focused to give kids, parents, and educators the tools they need to combat online harms. We owe it to the young people of this country to do everything we can to keep them safe. We need to keep kids safe, and we need to get it right when it comes to privacy rights. We understand the importance of safeguarding individuals' sensitive information, especially in the digital age where privacy breaches can have severe, and as we've heard from some of our witnesses, sometimes fatal consequences.
This is one of those things where I don't even really know what she's on about. She might be talking, there's a couple bills she might be talking about, but she's trying to tie them all together, and I hate this crap. Because while they're trying to talk about online safety and privacy, they are also tying this to the Online Harms Act, because that is basically what she's talking about here. There's another private members bill being pushed, rightfully so, by Conservative MP Arnold Viersen about privacy around, frankly, pornography websites and trying to keep minors off of them in every way possible. But the thing is that the NDP actually doesn't really care about that much. Really, they're going to try and hijack any bill they can get, including Bill C-63, in order to censor people online, that they are using deliberately vague language in order to make sure that they can get as much power over the internet as possible. That is the NDP's agenda here, and that is what needs to be fought, even if what she's doing is supporting both C-63 as well as Arnold Viersen's bill. Then what has to happen is that the NDP doesn't get to change these bills in committee and make it so that they can then attach other requirements onto websites, onto the internet, that make it so that based on the safety of children, that we then end up destroying people's ability to actually speak freely and do things freely. Because when they're talking about the safety, of children online, she's not actually, she doesn't care about their safety at all. There's a reason she's pro-Hamas. She actually doesn't care about murders and, you know, rapists and whatnot in Israel. Hamas crazy people. She is specifically pushing a pro-censorship agenda and trying to hijack good and bad bills in order to get control of the internet. So that's where I'm going to leave that off today. I'm going to follow up a little bit on the ongoings when it comes to different censorship bills, as well as different online safety bills, and what needs to be actually done with these to make them work effectively, or to just kill them in the case of Bill C-63. But if you guys want to support the show, you can donate to my Give, Send, Go campaign in the description below. We have a legal fund going because we're being sued for defamation. Defamation that after 2.5 years of being sued, the person suing us has not actually submitted any evidence to prove that what we said was wrong or defamatory in any way. Yet they, just because they're a rich man, are trying to hurt us in court by just throwing paperwork at us. Anyways, you can also join the TNT Telegram channel, also linked in the description below. And then in the next few days or so, I'm going to be reworking my campaign website from Signal Hill in order to actually be a campaign organizing tool for us all to use, so that people can sign up on the website in order to be able to get more information on local races, and so that I can send people information regarding local nomination candidates, local municipal candidates in their area, so we can try to expand the amount of knowledge that people have regarding their choices in our democratic system. But anyways, that should be it for me today, guys. Thank you for watching the Wyatt Claypool Show. Sorry that it always ends up being a little bit rambly, but that's just how it is in this world.